Hello and welcome to Hare in the Hawthorn. It seems like a hot minute since I've been back, but I am back and practically with a bang this evening. Stupidly, I decided to record on bonfire night. So if you hear whizzes and bangs, I've not moved to a war-torn country. It's just my neighbours setting off mortar bombs next door that in disguise of a firework. Hopefully we'll get through it without too much of a do. I'm sure we will. It's quieting down for the minute, but I'm not guaranteeing that there won't be a shenanigans going off outside. So we're back with another guest. It's not just me waffling on this evening. And it's a guest who I've just been saying about um, my attention span with anything internet at the moment is very, very short and has been for a while, and podcasts. And I feel like I miss out on a plethora of people's work. But podcasts in particular, I'll start watching, and I'll watch a bit, and then I'll get sidetracked with stuff. But this guy's podcast is one of those ones I've been running around telling everybody about it because it just absolutely is up my street and captivates me. Format is just brilliant. It's very much, if you're Hare in the Hawthorn fan and you love the kind of content that we do here, then you're gonna absolutely love this. So I want to welcome, and I'm hoping that I get this pronunciation and I don't elongate one bit and shorten another bit. Darragh Mason. Have I got it right?
Yeah, Grant. Grant. Yeah.
Ooh,
I mean, I don't expect people not from Ireland to pronounce my name properly, so it's all good. You've done very well. Nothing to worry
that
about.
means I've got it completely blinking
No,
wrong.
you're not. You're grand. It's just it's Dara. That's it.
Darragh. Oh, so
Yeah.
it's quicker. It's quicker on the,
Yeah.
yeah, because I thought, am I elongating this? Yeah, the Irish names, don't get me onto that.
I
It's
know.
like
I
you're
know.
on another
Yeah.
planet with
Yeah. We,
names.
we do. I mean, I have friends for several years who still call me Darragh, and they have been
Right.
corrected. They're like, yeah, yeah, whatever, Darragh. So I wouldn't. I don't stress about it.
Oh, that's good. I don't feel so bad now. It's one of those things, and I get somebody's pronunciation stuck in my head, and then it's there forever. And I've got a
Know what
lovely
you mean?
friend of mine
Yeah.
who's Lorien, and I just could not get my head around that for years. But yeah, I'm there with it now. It's Lorien. So anyway, we're side questing already, which is a good sign. Tell people on Hare in the Hawthorn who haven't come across you other than Spritbox, which is your podcast, and want to get into that a bit more. But you're very much like me that it looks like a scattergun of areas of work that you do,
Mhm.
but they all kind of mesh together. So who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm Darragh Mason, and I'm delighted to be here, and thank you very much for your kind words about my podcast. Um, I suppose overall, I'm I guess a storyteller really, with an interest in, I guess, broadly the esoteric, um, and and the spirit world,
Mhm.
and how people interact with that spirit world. Um, I was a documentary and travel photographer for a number of years, and my work really, um, it's centered around those themes. That's kind of what I was drawn to story wise.
Mhm.
I shot all the kind of stuff that you'd expect travel photographers to do, the bread and butter stuff. But my kind of, I guess, what I would say my standout work would have been around particular, say, religious sects that may have a interesting practice.
Mhm.
I also shot a lot of stuff around the theme of the Djinn. I spent a lot of time in India.
Mhm.
I've been to India about like four times. Spent a lot of time traveling around India, looking at kind of different stories in that vein, and a lot of time in obviously Ireland and the Balkans,
Mhm.
looking at different stories that piqued my interest. And those were mainly around people's religious beliefs, if they were leaning into kind of the real esoteric,
Mhm.
kind of outside of convention. Um, Other than that, I'm an author. I published my book, Song of the Dark Man, Father of Witches, Lord of the Crossroads, last year with Inner Traditions. Um, what else have I done? See, this is the difficult part. I told you I'd forget.
I know.
Um,
I'll just double check. I wanted to talk to you about just briefly going back while we remember all the other things that you've ever done. So in terms of, I can really feel the draw with, particularly with photography when you get into looking at those slightly edgier sides of religion and sort of occult, because there is something beautifully macabre, isn't there,
Yeah.
about a lot of those religions. So I could, when you were talking about it, I could almost see sort of, the behind the camera of the things that you kind of snap with. Did you kind of stumble across those scenes really, or was it sort of set up and you knew what you was doing and you knew where you were
Mm.
going, or?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it's kind of a mix of both. So, say for example, if I was going to shoot a particular theme, right? So
Hmm.
I'd be fairly well researched in that theme. Um, with documentary photography, you usually have like 12 to 15 shots you want to tell a story with.
Hmm.
You have to be there enough time. Sometimes you don't get that privilege. Sometimes it's kind of like you got one chance to tell a story, and that's quite restricting. But ideally, you want to spend quite a bit of time with the subject. Um, so I think in that terms, what is the story I want to tell?
Hmm.
Um, the camera is, what I found is a really great door opener. So you kind of get access in a different way that people are aware of you, but you're not just there kind of as a pupil or there kind of as like an audience member. Like you're actively kind of observing, and
Hmm.
that means you get access to other things that you wouldn't normally get access to.
Hmm.
Um, so that's how those kind of stories would unfold. But but how do you get those stories? Well, like initially, I would find a theme that I was interested in. Um, Unsurprisingly, I read a hell of a lot, so I would find kind of areas that I wanted to explore. Um, the process of doing photographic work would be along the lines of pitching to some of the agencies that I worked with, sometimes to magazines that I worked with, and go, "This is where I'm going. This is what I want to do. Are you interested in that?" Like the hi ho days of a magazine going, here's a couple of thousand, go off
Hmm.
and send us when you're done. That that hasn't existed for a very long time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like show me the goods and I'll tell you if I want it. You know,
Mm.
um, or it goes through an agency and they kind of resell for you. So I would kind of come up with a couple of kind of statements around the type of story that I wanted to tell, pitch that to
Mm.
the magazines and to the agencies, and off I'd go, and do the stories and send kind of digital contact sheets back, and they'd pick what they want, and we'd go from there. But generally, uh, what I was very the good thing about that model, it allowed me to tell the stories that I wanted to tell.
Yeah.
So that meant that I was off, like in Varanasi, shooting stories on the Agori, and they're kind of very much a kind of an extreme Hindu sect who, from the outward observer, you would say is kind of a left hand path. They would basically practice things that would be seen as abhorrent within conventional
Mm.
Hinduism. You know, they for all intents and purposes, would do a lot of rituals with human remains, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. The core part of their practice was this idea of like um, that everything was divine,
Yeah.
including the profane, and they would act that out as part of their belief. Like everything, one of the kind of extreme things would be things like they'd meditate on a corpse overnight,
Hmm.
which is called like Shava Sadhana. So Shava
Wow.
meaning corpse, and Sadhana being the kind of a crude word for a translation would be like magical practice, something
Hmm.
like that. Um, so
And did you document that? Were you able to document that particular ritual, or?
not that particular ritual, but I did document a ritual of an Agori practitioner um, doing a ritual drinking whiskey out of a skull.
Hmm.
So I photographed all of
Hmm.
that. And yeah, that was in the kind of back streets of Varanasi. I also got covered in human ash in the process. I was given a blessing by an Agori,
Okay.
which I was expecting kind of like some sort of thumb rub, but it actually included a face full of human ash rubbed down my face. So
There's all kinds of
yeah,
biological kind of, anomalies
yeah,
with that one, isn't there?
yeah. It
Definitely.
was like don't breathe in.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I got up close and personal in that regard. People often ask me like, did I drink out of the skull? And I was like, no, nope.
No.
There was the Ganges water and oil and stuff in there as well. So
Yeah, no, not with
yeah,
the Ganges water. No, that would be a big no. Skull I'd
big
be
no, really.
okay with, I think, especially
Yeah,
if it was whiskey. I'd be
yeah,
okay with that, but yeah,
yeah.
not river water.
Exactly,
Not.
exactly. Yeah,
So on these, there must have been times when, I mean, obviously there's a slight disconnect when you're using photography, isn't there, from
mhm,
because you are concentrating and immersed in getting those photos to tell that tale.
yeah,
Has there ever been a time when you've kind of stepped back and gone, holy crap, what's just
yeah,
gone off there? Or, should I really be witnessing this?
yeah. There has, yeah. I mean, that's a really good question because that only really ever happened once. Like that kind of the skull ritual that I photographed. Like people have asked me, were you nervous or did you find it upsetting? And like the truth of it is that I didn't feel anything at all. You know,
Hmm.
like because I was concentrating on the photography. I was concentrating on is the image, is the composition in my viewfinder correct? Have I
Hmm.
got enough frames to tell the right story? What shots do I need? I was in that headspace,
Yeah.
which is almost a barrier from the experience to a degree,
Yes.
but it also means I'm really aware of what I'm looking at.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm not looking at it as an audience member. I'm looking at it as kind of an observer with a purpose.
Hmm.
But the one time where I genuinely was kind of faltering with the camera was when I shot a story called City of Jinns, which
Hmm.
was um, about Delhi and its association with the Jinn, the fire spirits
Hmm.
of the Islamic world, and what the nature of the story was it's a very clumsy sentence, but the subject I was going after was uh, inspired by the book by William Dalrymple, a historian and travel writer, and incidentally a very good photographer in his own right, um, called City of Jinns, and that was
Hmm.
about his year in Old Delhi as a young correspondent, and the kind of the theme that he pulled through was this idea of Jinn and the relationship with Delhi as kind of like just this kind of like minor theme to hang the kind of the year on,
Hmm.
because where he lived in Old Delhi was very close to a site called Nizamuddin Darragh, which is the tomb of a very famous Sufi saint called Nizamuddin. And so I decided to visit all the sites associated with Jinn in the book and photograph them to kind of build this picture of kind of like haunted Delhi, but through the lens of this book. And I visited, I think, one other site as well, which wasn't mentioned in the book. Um, but I had a dream before I went, and it was at a kind of a Sufi event, so it was lots of kind of vibrant music and singing, and I was sat on the floor amongst all the other kind of people there, and the person to my left had their back to me. When I turned and looked at them, they turned and looked at me, and their face was decomposed, and a snake came out of one eye and went through the other, and it said, "Don't come here." Um,
Hmm.
and as you can imagine, that was very jarring.
Hmm.
Um, and I went through an awful lot of mental acrobatics to kind of nullify that,
Hmm. Yeah.
to kind of oh, it's just nerves, it's pre-travel this, it's all that kind of stuff to really try and
So that's
retrospectively.
very, very specific, isn't it, to try and
Yeah,
get out your mind. And the
yeah.
imagery is very, very well connected
Mhm.
with what you're going into. I think I would shake that must have took a lot.
Well, the guy was wearing a white hat, and that's kind of relevant to it as well.
Hmm.
The left side is also relevant as well because within Jin lore, that kind of the idea of left is associated with, as it was within kind of within European traditions, with the sinister side. So
Hmm.
when they kind of diagnose a Djinn possession, if the sensations are on the left side or you're hearing a voice from the left side, it's seen as kind of that is a malevolent Djinn. So, but it was on the
Wow.
left side in this. So that's something I realized years later. Um, but anyway, the place where the dream was in Nizamuddin. So I
Mhm.
realized that kind of when I looked at some of the research images, I was like, "That's Nizamuddin. That's where I was in my dream." Um, in all honesty, I can't remember what came first, the research or the dream. But anyway, some months later, found myself there. I had a real string of bad luck getting there. My main camera body broke, couldn't be fixed. It was under a year old. The best technicians in London couldn't fix it, and it was just a recurring piece of like oil kept moving across the sensor, right? So it got cleaned dozens of times. Best technicians in London, down some very narrow lane in the back of Soho, where all the other kind of where the Nikon and Canon guys, because that's how long ago it was, is before Sony started dominating the market. Um, that's where they took their kit to be fixed, and they basically said, we don't know what this is, we can't fix it, we recommend you remove the whole housing of the sensor and replace it.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was a very costly exercise. I managed to kind of get another camera body, actually a camera upgrade, for the same price from a friend who was shipping all his gear off. But so off I went. My dad was coming with me for the first time. He was kind of wanted to see what I did. He broke his tooth in Heathrow.
Yeah.
you know. So and this is after me spending an awful lot of time in India. So I've got my stripes. I kind of I'm aware of kind of how challenging it could be. We had to change hotels like 3 times in 2 days. It was just like real just pain after pain after pain. Nothing too catastrophic, but it
Mhm.
wasn't easy. Um, and then I got the last site I shot was Nizamuddin. But when I got there, I had a young fixer with me, a Kashmiri photographer, and he was talking to the Sufis on site and kind of explained the nature of what I was shooting. They pointed me to this enclosure, and inside the enclosure, they explained people with spirit problems, jinn and evil spirit problems, were there to be prayed over and exercised
Mhm.
essentially. And so I was pointed in the direction, and there, sitting, looking out of the door, is a man in a white hat.
Mm.
And he's,
No,
yeah, well, this is it,
that's
right?
just sent chills up me. That as I,
Yeah,
oh wow.
well, it did the exact same to me on the spot. And he was eyeballing me, and he was like mouthing off, like it looked like he was just swearing at me. Um,
Hmm.
and I was really hesitating to the point that my fixer was like, "Take the photo, dude. What are you what are you doing? What are you doing?" Um, and so I put the camera to my face and you know framed him. He stopped talking, just immediately kind of stared at the camera. And it was at that point where I was like, I don't know what this picture is going to cost me.
Yeah.
I was like, am I taking a picture of somebody who's possessed? I don't know. You know, I took the picture. It's part of the story. Um, but that was the main time where I was like, this. I don't know what this has cost me. Whether it has
Mm.
or not. I mean, I don't think it has, retrospectively, but certainly that was the principal time where I was like, I think I might have bitten off more than I could chew here. Yeah.
I think that sounds to me like you paid your dues before you went there, and it's almost like it sounds like spirit testing you to see whether you can get through the image of that dream and still have the bravery to do it, and then keep on going with all these, because it's often little things, isn't it, that
Mhm.
kind of stack up against you. It's nothing big to stop you,
Yeah.
enough to stop you, but it was all these things that were like, we're going to test you. We're going to see if you have the nouns to actually get to that point.
Yeah.
So maybe you paid the penance before you even rocked up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I think you're probably right in that sense because, like, I think a lot of spirit interaction can be like that. It is a test of
Mm.
metal, because it does take a certain amount of fortitude to carry on and keep going in some of this stuff. It really does. Um, and the result of that is a story being told. You know,
Yeah.
um, and sometimes that's what spirits want. They want their
Yeah, they
story.
do.
yeah,
and they want the right person to do it. I
yeah,
know it's absolutely small fry, but I went through a spate of doing Hair in the Hawthorn where everything technically would go wrong if
right.
I was talking specifically about the fairies,
Mm,
or I'd get to a point where we'd be discussing something that I think maybe they weren't happy with me talking about, and I'd get shut down. It just like the computer would just freeze up completely, or just, be some
yeah,
electrical issue. And while we're talking about gin, because it's such a fascinating subject and one that I suppose doesn't come into the general lexicon within the UK within paranormal so much. And I actually think that there is a lot of um, work to be done around understanding gin in this
mm,
country, especially now, we are heavily multicultural as well. And as a paranormal investigator, I think it's paramount that you understand these kind of energies and entities. And even fairy, even those who are fairy researchers, I think it's fascinating, the
yeah,
the motifs. So what is a gin? What is a gin in essence?
yeah. I mean, you're right. Like it is something that people need to understand. The similarities between Jinn and Fairy are extraordinary.
Yes.
Um, in a kind of a in an interesting way, my research into the Jinn really brought me back to Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of while I was studying the Jinn and folklore around them and kind of accounts of people's experiences, I was really struck with kind of the similarity between these and the fairies. This is extraordinary, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but taking a step back as to what are the Jinn, essentially within um, the Islamic world, they're seen as one of the three sapient beings created by Allah. Those
Mm-hmm.
being kind of angels who are made of light, Jinn who are made of smokeless fire, and human beings who are made of sounding clay. Um, there was a schism in heaven when Allah created Adam, and He commanded the host of angel to bow to Adam. Them not having free will could do so. However, there's a little bit of conjecture around this, but there was a jinn among them called Iblis, who was either elevated by his kind of capability, his prowess, to be within the host of angel, but not of them, and he refused to bow to Adam. Um, Paraphrasing from memory now, but basically stating, "I am better than him. He is made of sounding clay, and I'm made of fire." Um, as a result, he is cast out of heaven, and he vows to beset Allah's creation along the straight path, the kind of the road to truth. And he's like, from behind him, from before him, I will kind of beset him, right? And that's where you kind of essentially have the kind of the Islamic kind of figure of evil. That would be Iblis. Um,
And just so I don't forget, is there any research prior to Christian connection with gin, like we see with fairies, that there is, folklore, pre-Christian folklore that include fairies, fairy motifs? Is there anything in your research that you've come across that's sort of pre-religion?
yeah, there is. I mean, certainly, kind of some of the kind of heavy hitters within Islam probably have where kind of like Mesopotamian gods, Sumerian gods, that kind of
Yeah,
thing. Particularly kind of wind deities, like Pazuzu,
yeah.
was probably like a wind deity. Became kind of like the lord of disease and plagues, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, um yeah, like Lilith, a version of Lilith called Lilu is a type of vampire, and pregnant women have a terrible fear of her, and they kind of pray against her. I think it's begins with a Q. It's not Carine. Carine is like a kind of a twin, Jinn twin that people have. Um, but this spirit is particularly it's related to Lilith, and the idea is that because Lilith lost her chance to be the mother of the human race, she despises mothers and newborns, and
Hmm.
new mothers and newborns are extremely vulnerable to her attacks.
hmm
Um, so she's the Queen of Night, that kind of thing.
hmm
So
So
yeah, stuff's
is it
ridiculous.
is Djinn then sort of an overarching name for anything that is on that kind of malevolent scale, or is there a kind of balance up where Jinn can be malevolent? You know, have they got
Yes,
that dual personality?
yeah, yeah, very much like fairy. Yeah,
Hmm
they. I mean, within kind of the folklore, you can have Muslim jinn, Jewish jinn, like Christian jinn. Um, they have said to have clan-like structures. They tend to be clustered around colors
hmm
that they have, kind of like this blue jinn, red jinn. They're tribes, So
hmm
like you'll have folklore about kind of like the Red King's daughter, that kind of thing. So they'll have that kind of division, and it's more about their nature that's clustered around that color rather than kind of like their red, as it were. Um, but it's extremely varied. When you think about kind of fairy lore and the different types of fairies, from kind of like brownies, Lanashi, Banshee, and so on. It's exactly the same within
Yeah.
the Jinn world. So yeah, Jinn is a collective term, just like fairy, you know. Um, but the origin, um, if you look at that origin myth of like where the Jinn are kind of cast out of heaven, you
Mhm.
then look at kind of the fairy lore of like there's a schism in heaven, and those that followed Lucifer are cast down. Some of those fell into the mounds and the barrows, and they became the fairies.
Yeah.
So it's very similar in that sense.
It fascinates me that just globally we have this phenomena that just is it's not just an explanation within set religions, but prior to that, but it's the same beings or the same kind of pantheon, if you like, of beings that are just the other side of the veil, if you like, that walk alongside us. And although that they have very human traits, they're very much set apart, aren't they? And the relationships that they have with humans are very, very similar, aren't they? So in terms of because we know that the genie in the bottle comes from the Djinn and that granting of three wishes, is that still sustained in sort of modern belief that they can give wishes? Because when you hear
Yeah,
Jinn in modernity, it is the possession and oppression and illness, isn't it? That side of things.
yeah. Well, when I first started releasing videos about the gin, um, essentially I'd written some lectures on it from a lot of research that I had done to support my photographic work. So I kind of had nowhere to put that, so I stuck it on YouTube about I don't know 10 years ago or something. Um, and I would get an awful lot of um, emails coming in from people asking me to perform um, certain jinn rituals for them, either to help them with jinn possession or to use jinn to influence things in their life, you know,
Mhm.
um, like jinn sorcery in effect. I got so much of it I just changed the contact form on my website to say I do not perform, these kind of rituals. There's no point in asking me. Um, so, in terms of people having that idea that jinn can grant them things, they 100% do. Yeah,
Mhm.
and there's very specific things like there's like talwees. They're kind of like amulets that will have certain jinn incantations on them that people wear. There's certain types of rings that people wear, like a ring of Solomon, ring of the Ifrit, ring of Iblis, even then that will said to bring kind of the favor of that particular like jinn king particularly,
Mhm.
where and like the jinn king are very similar to kind of the idea of like the kings of the cardinal directions and planetary and deities, that kind of stuff that you would find in Western magic. Um, so yeah, it's a jinn magic, and the idea of jinns being able to kind of grant you stuff or to um petition a jinn to act on your behalf. 100% is there. I mean, I went to a place called what's it called? For us, Shah Kutla, and that is it's kind of a ruin in the middle of Delhi, um, and it's said to be the most haunted place in Delhi. So it's supposed to be kind of home to 10,000 jinn. and there's a an Ashkatan pillar on the top, which is a very very old kind of relic of very early the kind of Hindu kingdoms, but that's said to be home of the King Jinn Lat Wali Baba. And what I found when I visited that site is that people were leaving letters there, and offerings of butter and milk, incidentally, and bread.
So fairy. That's fairy, definitely.
Exactly, exactly. And they were petitioning the jinn there to intercede in their behalf, and it was the range of human need that you would expect. So it was, can I win the Indian version of the lotto? Which incidentally is like 4 bars of gold, which is far cooler than just getting a check.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
you know, or asking people to the jinn to help their children with, say, substance abuse. So like the
Mhm.
whole gamut of human need. Um,
Mhm.
and when I was there, there was a family there that were going from kind of grotto to grotto. So it was like it's like a kind of a pyramidal kind of structure with three
Mhm.
levels on it, with the column on top, and inside is just full of these little grottos with little oil lamps and sweets left for the gin, this kind of stuff. So I met this family, and they were going from grotto to grotto, doing kind of like some kind of petitioning. Um, and my fixer kind of inquired of them, what are you doing, why are you doing this? And they were midway through a 14-day practice of like the Stations of the Cross, but in these grottos, going from grotto to grotto,
Mhm.
doing these petitions. And I was asking through my translator, well, is it working? Yeah. And the father of the family was like, yeah, we've already gotten part of what we're looking for. So they were Hindu. They were kind of working with the the powerful spirits that were in their area. Um, so yeah, in terms of petitioning Jinn to intercede on their behalf, it was very much a living thing. Equally, is very much a living thing that working with these spirits is seen as very dangerous. They're fire spirits. So their nature is of fire.
Mhm. I
If it's
did.
not controlled, it will consume things.
I came across a study, and I wish I could find it, and I'm sure you've come across it, and will be able to redirect me into it. Um, it was I think it was a sociologist, a it was British. It was a British study, and they had gone to Dubai, and they'd gone around the hospitals, and they'd started off asking junior doctors if they believed in gin and could
Yeah,
that be part of people's ailments. They then expanded that out into, everybody who worked in those hospitals, and I think it was over quite a few hospitals, and these were, these weren't rural, these were,
yeah,
big plush city hospitals, and the findings were extraordinary. It was something as high as 98% believed in gin,
yeah,
and a very, very similar level that believed that the gin could cause the majority of illness
yeah.
and would treat the gin alongside
Mm.
the ailment. And that just blew my mind. So what can have gin got certain sort of traits that you can go, yeah, that's a gin involved in this? Have they got certain things that they show us?
Um, there are certain manifestations that would be deemed jinn. So things like snakes, things like black dogs, which again would be think the black shuck and what have you
Yeah,
here. Those would definitely be seen as jinn, sometimes as human manifestations. But they would be associated with things like epilepsy, things like blindness, all the stuff that you associate with in fairy folklore it's all there in
yeah,
some form or another. Even down to quite specific things. So you've got like the Shigiha or the Giha Shi. I always mix it up. Like the fairy wind. Like the Jinn are said to travel in the wind.
yeah.
It's the same. It's the same stuff. But if you stumble upon the Jinn or you vex them in some way, there's going to be blowback.
Mhm.
Much the same way as if you cut down a fairy tree or you damage, you know, um, a barrow in some description, that there's attrition for that. It's seen
Yeah.
in the same way.
And
Like
do they come down? Do they come down in family curses? Would a Djinn follow a family
yeah,
bloodline?
yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and you also have the thing where people would have Jinn ancestry, you know.
Wow.
So you know the whole thing of like you get people who have fairy ancestry of some description. It's the same. Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that. I did not know that. And are they then in a similar vein? Is it people who have psychic abilities that are attributed with a Jinn bloodline, or is it people with certain attributes, or
Well, the way fairies are attributed with musical inspiration. So the Jinn are attributed with poetic inspiration.
uh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. The whispering of Jinn. Was is the whispering of Jinn. Um,
Wow.
um, so it's certainly um, like those kind of attributes. People start like there's a whole look was or was a depending on the region of the world. Is this idea of you know the kind of manipulation or whispering of Jinn. It can be poetic, but
Mhm.
it also can indications of kind of the different levels of kind of Jinn interference, right up to kind of total possession of the human being. Um, there's kind of stratas of this, but was could be anything from kind of like OCD symptoms, forgetting your prayers, a lot of what you would attribute to kind of what we would call mental health issues. They would say, well, that's the effect of was a.
Mhm.
But things like knowledge of places where you've never been, knowledge of
Mhm.
things you shouldn't have, like knowledge of the other world, Al Gayab, you know, this kind of thing. So it's that interaction with the jinn that's giving that kind of knowledge. Um, so you would have people who would naturally be inclined to that kind of thing, much as you would have fairy seers. And it does seem to follow families. There's cases of people in the States who have long left kind of like the kind of Arabian Peninsula and other places where jinn are said to be, and they're living in America, third generation, and they're experiencing these things. So
Wow.
they follow families, and then the idea of the lifespan of the jinn is 1,000 years. So the members of a family are kind of flashes in the pan, as it were, compared to that.
So if somebody was having difficulty, say that could be confused with a haunting or some kind of curse, how would people know that that was actually the jinn, um, and not the spirit of the dead or a demon, or what would be the traits that would distinguish them from those things, if any?
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, those kind of traits within was would be
Hmm.
kind of the kind of the identifiers, as it were. But that what I mentioned earlier about the left side, that is a kind
Yes.
of a diagnostic element. There's also there's also a certain type of sanctioned magic or healing within Islam. Um, I can't remember for the life of me remember what it's called, but they would do diagnosis as to kind of is there jinn possession here,
Mm.
and kind of what that involves is kind of certain types of tests, like say like resistance to reading passages of the Quran over the
Yeah.
individual, immersing them in Quranic water, which is basically Islamic holy water.
Yeah.
Um, but weirdly sensitivity to fire. So the actual jinn is said to find actual fire um, really uncomfortable in
Fascinating.
the human body. Um, and here's a good one for you: sensitivity to iron. So there was a site
Right.
that I visited. in Delhi, and I had a small iron chain just outside the tomb of this Sufi saint. And basically, one of the tests they did to see if there was jinn possession is if the individual could hold the iron chain and step into the kind of the sacred ground of the tomb. Um, and there was a hereditary caretaker there who was a Sufi, and he explained to me that how they would diagnose this is through being able to tolerate holding iron, which the jinn found repellent, just like the fairies, and then step into that sacred space. He also explained that he would mentally uh, receive communication in terms of how we visualized it was if it was like a green flag, it was a mental health issue. If it was a red flag, it was some kind of spirit interference. And he did say evil spirit or jinn. He separated those two.
Hmm.
Um, the categorization, however, is very blurry,
Hmm.
but they are seen as separate things. And that's how they would do diagnosis. And incidentally, they have these pots all over the forest ground called what are they called again? I think it's matkla, which is just your kind of basic earthenware pot that you see anywhere in India for holding water and food and what have you.
Hmm.
And the jinn who and the evil spirits that were cast out of people were imprisoned in those. So you're literally genie in a bottle.
Yeah, fascinating. I know going back to the iron, I mean that is always been a fascinating and a hot topic, especially with fairies and people coming up with lots of different theories about why iron is that deterrent or that kind of tell of fairies. Have we got any more sort of truth in the matter of why it's iron with the gin? Does that throw any light onto why that particular metal?
Um, no, not really. No. I mean, they said that steel is effective too. You
Hmm.
know, but there's there's some very kind of complex folklore around this because it just muddies the water.
Hmm.
You know, familiar with the fairy idea of the blacksmith can also break fairy spells. You know, like so there's that process of turning ore into metal. You know, and that metallurgy as a whole has some kind of potency and power that it can break this
Hmm.
type of magic. Um, Equally within um, in Tibetan kind of Bon shamanism, their traditions, the most powerful purbas, the three-sided knives, are those from sky iron, which is meteor iron.
Yeah.
So for some reason, this metal seems to have this particular potency, um, and I really I'm kind of lost as to what the reason is. It comes up in India as well with yakshinis, you know, which are
Hmm.
very similar to fairies as well.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but it seems to be almost a universal thing that iron has this particular potency and thwarting effect with these kind of.
Mm. It is it's one of those things that I think I've got a grasp on maybe why, and then it's like everything with this kind of subject, it just dissipates into mist in front of your eyes,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah,
Somebody else will throw a curveball onto the matter, and you'll be like, "Damn it! I thought I'd formulated something." And but such is the nature of these things. I listened to your podcast with Morgan Daimler about it, and I was literally sat sort of talking to the screen, going, "Yes, that fits and that fits and that fits." It was absolutely brilliant. I am going to come across again with my paranormal investigation hat on because I know a lot of people who watch this are paranormal investigators and will come across these kind of things. In terms of how to deal with them, I know that very much there is. Kind of an overarching way of dealing with malevolent spirits, especially within people's homes, and it's very Catholic. It's in flavour, and I get a little bit antsy about that, especially when we've obviously come across something that isn't within that Catholic realm, say fairies or whatever that's haunting a property, and it just doesn't work. That kind of thing just doesn't work. Is there a specific way of handling, or would it have to be somebody from a religious background to be able to deal with that?
Um, so I think this leans into um, whatever kind of spiritual symbols the individual who's experiencing this has.
Yeah.
So like a Christian exorcism of sorts would probably work on, people who are from a Christian country, because we've got that egregoric force,
Yes.
you know, behind it. Um, Equally, there's traditions across the world who are not remotely Abrahamic, but have techniques for dealing with these entities. Um, so I would say there definitely are. However, with if you're a person from that culture, there's a relationship there.
Hmm.
It's you're experiencing that interference, that obsession through the lens of your own um, symbolic language. Whether you
Hmm.
identify as a Christian or not. I'm a very very lapsed Catholic. I never really believed it in the first place. However, that symbolic language is still very much in my
Yes.
psyche. So I would say, um, probably if you're dealing with somebody from that kind of background, you're probably going to
Mhm.
need to use something that is relevant to that background. And
Mhm.
they're Quranic texts, just as you have in Christianity. They're Quranic texts that are done. It's an interview process. You can find lots of videos of exorcisms and treating of
Mhm.
jinn online. There was a place in London that did lots of it. I was following their YouTube for a long time. I can't for the life of me remember what they're called, but it's very much what you'd expect to see.
Mhm.
Like but it can be brutal at times. Sometimes it's like it's you know beating the gin out of the individual, you know. But there are equally books um, that explain this process. I have Al Rukia is the name of the treatment. That's it. Look at me and my memory. So Rukia is the name of the type of treatment for the removal and treatment of evil eye, jinn
Mhm.
possession, and black magic. Right. So
Mhm.
that's the kind of sanctioned way within Islam to deal with this. And there's a book by a North African sheikh that goes through his processes and how he would diagnose, treat the whole kind of gamut of these types of afflictions and issues that people may have, but they're very much within the Quranic framework, you know.
I
Um,
suppose it's that meeting of vibrations, isn't it? That you probably get a quicker result and an easier result if you are on that vibrational frequency,
yeah,
if it is from that mother tongue or from that particular
yeah.
um, religion. Um, I mean, it absolutely fascinates me. There was a case a few years ago where a woman who had been sent a jinn, she believed she'd been sent a jinn
Mhm.
um, as a curse in her direction, and the paranormal, the British paranormal, sort of kind of had to fill those boots, if you like, and try and find a good way to deal with that matter. And I think it's definitely something that we need in our toolkit. We need to understand much better
Yeah.
and understand how, because it is, I think it's probably one of those entities or energies that is bigger than we can imagine in this country,
Mhm.
because it spans gin span a vast majority of the globe, don't they?
They
In
do, yeah. The entire Islamic
Yeah,
world.
yeah, it is absolutely fascinating. I'm going to have to ask you, because I don't want to run out of time with bits, and I want to include lots of bits. I'm absolutely fascinated with how people start on this kind of journey into the esoteric, and B, the experiential stuff. So I'm going to start off and kind of try and find out from you, where did it begin? What was there a catalyst? Was it just something that you kind of, as you grew up, it was part of you, or where did it begin?
Um, it's a great question, and it's something that I've pondered for a long time, and really, when I think about it, in depth, and I'm honest about it, I think it comes baked in, you know.
Yes.
But then I look at my parents and I go, oh well, it's obvious. Compare, look at you two, and I'm like, well, no wonder I'm like this, you know. Uh, but but and I think you get hints of this in like I'm a father myself, and I see my own children and kind of how some of their interests, where they come from, and I can kind of already tell who's the next one who's going to be doing this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
like so I do think it's something that from my perspective has come down through family lines. When I was about 7 or 8, I was big into Dungeons and Dragons, which is definitely like the right wing Christians who say like yoga, Dungeons and Dragons, tarot cards, these are all gateways. I'm like, I think you're right, actually. In
You're
fairness to things like that,
absolutely right.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I had I had a small kind of writing desk, and I had all these pictures of kind of like alchemists' caves and all the kind of Dungeons and Dragons stuff around on the corner of the room, and I'd taken like an old meditation robe of one of my parents, and it was a black one, and I draped it over the table, and I had these little mini candelabras on it. So I'd made this kind of like black magician's altar as like 7.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad going, "Can you not do that, please?" But
Yeah.
so I think there's instinctive things that people are acting out, in
Hmm.
in their childhood. Um, when I was 13, I was attempting astral traveling, and I've used a
Yeah.
pendulum since about that age. So it's always been there. When I look
Mm.
back now, I can see this is just all. It's just something that's had kind of peaks and troughs in my life in terms of an interest. But again, when I look at the photographic areas that I wanted to explore and then went out and explored, they always leaned into the kind of religious fringes or the absolutely esoteric. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, it's always been there basically.
Yeah, I think that there tends to be two types of people, and it's either those who kind of just don't really know where it's come from, and it's just been always part of life and who you are and an interest in all those different areas. Like you, it was kind of more of the folkloric aspect that started it off. The love of Jason and the Argonauts and the pantheon of gods and all those kind of things that we grew up with at that time. And then there's the other side of it, those who have that big bang
Yeah,
experiential, and they definitely need to kind of explore, don't they? Because
yeah,
they cannot comprehend it.
yeah.
Um,
The
so talking
worldview
about
shadow.
experiences, this is what I really love, because I absolutely I'm adamant that there is nobody who stares into this abyss who hasn't had some freaky like things
Yeah,
happen
yeah,
in their life. Is there any that you can talk us through?
yeah. I mean, I've uh, my father's the seventh child of a seventh child, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
That's a start.
yeah, exactly. And from a very young age, I was afraid of the dark, like really, really afraid of the dark, and because I could see things in it, and very young age, not really able to articulate that. But as I got older, I always had that kind of like sense of things were in the room, or around, and that was that kind of thing, that fear or feeling that just sets your nervous system, properly kind
Yeah.
of to DEFCON 4. So I've always had that. Um, when I was about 17 and I lived kind of in rural Galway, um, um, I started um, drawing these kind of creatures, right? They kind of like half animal, half human beings, this kind of stuff. And what I realize now were elementals,
Yeah.
and that was essentially what was in my vicinity, and I was sensing them, I was hearing them, you know. I didn't actually see open-eyed anything,
Hmm.
but I certainly had it in vision, and had the sense of them. Um, so I've always had that kind of thing going on. That kind of meant I had kind of 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the world. When I I lived in London 20 years ago in kind of South London. Um, I saw a column float through my room of kind of like a cloud with like kind of blue purpley sparks, and it just float through the room. Um, and it was I was gonna sit in bed, right, and I was like, okay, I close my eyes, open it. Oh, good, it's still there. Okay, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I wish this was a cataract. But like that kind of stuff, and that turned out that apartment. There was actually I had a couple of housemates, and one of them was actually a very psychic person, and I remember several occasions coming home and a different flatmate was like, I'm really glad you're home. The doors have been slamming, and kind of all this kind of stuff. At one stage, I got a call from the psychic flatmate going, are you taking the piss with all the kitchen? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. He's like, all the cupboard doors are open and the plates are stacked on the ground. Which
Wow.
was like one plate, two plates, one plate, two plates stacked on the ground.
Wow.
I didn't see that. That's what he was telling me. But yeah, it was like door slamming, all that kind of stuff in the house. So I had kind of those experiences of like, okay, that's it's pretty racy, but like not world shattering. But
Yeah.
however, I I've always been a bit drawn to other practices, and um, when was it now? I've been a magical practitioner, mainly solo for most of my life, and not to a particularly high level at all. But I started working kind of in basic ceremonial magic around 2020, and I was doing a kind of the kind of lower tier of telemic work around um, Resh, which is kind of worship of adoration of the sun 4 times a day, and then kind of there's a whole meditation cycle that would go with it. And there was one particular meditation which is called the middle pillar, which is you kind of drawing down this energy into you, the
Mhm.
kind of like and rolling it around your body through different chakras, calling in these kind of the different vibrations of the various kind of pantheons within Telema. And I was doing that, and over this week, I decided to commit to it and kind of not be half-assed and do it properly. And when I was doing the meditation, I had a kind of a poster on the wall of the Three of Life. So I was just kind of studying that and memorizing the various Sephiroth. And it only happened when I was in this meditation that like the poster would like peel off the wall, and it kept happening. It would only happen when I
Wow.
was doing this meditation. I was like, that's a bit weird. And then at one stage I did the meditation and I had an extremely this was when we talk about experiential stuff. This is the stuff I couldn't write off. This is the stuff
Yeah.
where it doesn't matter what
Yeah.
mental acrobatics you do, it's not happening. Right, your world has changed.
Yeah.
And I had a vision of this like really somatic, like it was fully sensory, like and it was just like panoramic of this like wall of fire and this kind of eye coming out of the fire and turning into this kind of black silhouette of an angel in front of me, right? And it referring to me and then taking off
Mhm.
vertically. And I had that sensation of like, when you go down a lift really quickly, you kind of
Yes.
like get all the kind of weird feelings. I think the Scottish call that fizzy willy, which always cracks me up. That
That's
feeling,
brilliant.
but it was like that, but going up, right? Like
Hmm.
really kind of roller coaster feeling. Um, and it utterly terrified me. I was like, okay, I wasn't expecting this. This has happened. I
Hmm.
know it's happened. I can't rationalize it, and I think I've bitten off more than I can chew. And I just stopped everything. I just no, I'm not doing any more of that. That's way too much. And it took it was about 3 months before I spoke to anybody about it. And I worked with some um, amazing witches that I know who, and then I worked with a very psychic friend of mine who's a bit witchy as well. But
Hmm.
they helped me through it, and
Yeah.
they kind of helped me kind of process it and understand what had
Hmm.
actually happened. Um, and really, that was where my book came out of. That was kind of
Yeah,
In
please
between. Yeah,
let's jump onto your book.
yeah.
Absolutely perfect because I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated. Tell us about the book.
Well, originally this came out of folklore because I was noticing, that as I said to you earlier, the Djinn brought me back to kind of Ireland, right? So I was
Hmm.
seeing all this Djinn folklore, and that's identical to Irish folklore. This is remarkable, So you've got like the idea of like the pot of gold,
Hmm.
like fairies hiding treasure. Well, Djinn hide treasure as well. They're associated with
Hmm.
treasure as well. Um, and even at super granular stuff like there's a taboo around throwing dirty water out of your house without saying Bismillah, look out, right?
Yes.
There's water coming. You've
Yeah.
exactly the same taboo in areas of Ireland where it's like hug it, the Ishkasalak. The
Hmm.
dirty water's coming, right? And All Hallows Eve, there's lots of taboos around. You don't throw stuff out in case you hit a spirit,
Hmm.
right? It's the same with fairies. So you exactly the same stuff. Um, Anyway, so brought me back to Ireland, and I was getting very much into Irish folklore, and I kept noticing this theme of this kind of like dark rider, right? On Far Dove, the black man, or in Far Durka, the dark man, as this kind of adversarial figure who would beset people on the road, or in some way intercept their journey. And at the same time, I was interviewing magical practitioners, but particularly witches would talk about. I saw this man in black, who turned up in my apartment and zapped me, and next thing I knew, I was practicing witchcraft, you know,
Hmm.
um, and there was just a lot of those. So I kept
Yeah.
seeing these, and I was kind of, okay, that's really weird. I keep noticing this, and all of the information kept coming to me about it. Then I had that vision, you know, which I equated with him, you know, slash it. Um, so I am. It took a long time to kind of, as I said, process it, work through it. Do I want this? This is something that's seems extremely dangerous.
Hmm.
And there's good reason to think that. Certainly, it's not for everybody. But as I kind of worked through it, through an awful lot of meditation and divining, I became far more accustomed to it, to the idea of it. Um, but the Dark Man, this figure, the Dark Man, is an initiator, right?
Hmm.
It's a call to
Yeah.
to witchcraft. But this figure, I found it going back into Irish folklore for the um, earliest stories about the Fianna, you know, and the story of the birth of Usheen is what I kind of really talk to in my book, in linking this back into Irish folklore. You've lots of kind of relatively modern folklore from kind of like the Irish revival, from the likes of kind of
Yeah.
Lady Gregory and Lady Wilde, who have specific stories about the Dark Rider, and kind
Hmm.
of the kind of the various behaviors, which incidentally is often referred to as King of the Fairies or Lord of the Dead. There's an innate tie to fairy with this figure. Like
Yeah.
again, you can't categorize it. It's all over the place. And Basically, kind of through about 18 months worth of work,
Hmm.
um, I kind of came to the point of this is a story that I kind of I want to tell. I was gonna kind of make a proposal about some of my photographic work and accompanying essays and put that out there, but they're kind of the through divination it came back very strongly. No, it's this book, the Dark
Yeah.
Man work, um, and I ended up out on Dartmoor at midnight, with some witches, um, calling him, right,
Yeah.
summoning him, under kind of the protection of Hecate, as to kind of essentially, what do you want?
Mm.
Why do you keep
Mm.
ringing my bell?
Yeah.
And it came back, just said, one of the things I heard was just right, and that was the Saturday night. On the Monday morning, I was on the call. I was on a call to a publisher in America. Like literally, the road was opened,
Mm.
um, and it's been an extraordinary process. But it's changed my understanding of magic, and particularly witchcraft as a whole. In terms of like the nature element of it,
Yeah.
right? Which is
Oh, I'm
tends
sorry,
to
I was grinning away there because it's that time old story, isn't it? That uh we we are, and especially creatives, writers, poets, artists, and I suppose used is a too strong a word, but almost channeled through, aren't we?
oh,
To
100%. Yeah,
to give stories, and it's like this being wanting to sort of come through you to
mhm,
permeate sort of the human realm. My next question with that is, because I'm struggling with this as well at the minute, is why? There seems to be this resurgence of these beings wanting to have a relationship again
yeah,
with us in the human realm, and it's but the why just keeps coming up
yeah,
over and over again in my mind about why that is.
hmm yeah.
Any clues?
It's they want their story told. You know,
Yes.
like that's it. You know, and like simply kind of what has been said about them
Mhm,
through kind of the cudgel of kind of Abrahamic teaching and the spread of those religions
mhm.
has demonized these figures.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
like the dark man presents in a very challenging way, right?
Mhm.
So it's and equally if you've got that kind of symbol set that we spoke about, you know, it's not you're like, no, this isn't great.
Yeah.
Everything I've ever heard is not good
Yeah.
about this, right? Um, but it is, we're certainly presented with a test of metal, and part of that is that initial exposure because it's world shattering, um, and it's whether or not you can kind of proceed with that. And it's not something I suggest lightly at all. I'm not glib about it at all, because it isn't for everybody. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Um, but why did it keep coming to me? And it's like, well, I may be one of those people that would be able to kind of formulate some kind of story that it felt was appropriate.
Yeah.
And that's it. But you're right. It's artists. It's poetry, and I say it in the book. I say like like the we learn about the magical and enchantment of the world, both in its dark and light. Through
Yes.
the auguries of the children of the dark man, and that is
Mhm.
not just the witches. It's the storytellers. It's the
Yes.
artists. You know, and there are so many artists who are at the avant-garde, the absolute point of creating work which is of that current of that energy, you know
Mhm.
um and it's a very difficult place to be. It's a very lonely place to be, and you can see the trouble it causes when that kind of energy is going through somebody. Like it takes a physical toll,
Mhm.
like it's extremely exhausting. I went grey after my book. I'm
Yeah.
only 25.
You're looking great for
Yeah.
25. I'm
Yeah.
very conscious of time. I mean, I could speak to you forever. And I am going to have to get you
Mm,
back. I mean, the witchcraft element as well is something that I would love to explore with you, because listening to you, and I'm just in the back of my mind going, I've had a very similar experience, and there's been one or two times when I've
yeah,
just thought, yeah, I can equate to that completely.
yeah.
Before you do, before you do go, the podcast. I kind of started off with telling people about the podcast, and I often think about your podcast as Hare and the Hawthorn on steroids. It's kind of everything slick that I would like Hare and the Hawthorn to be, and you've absolutely nailed it. But can you just give people a flavour of what you talk about, who you talk to?
Yeah, I so the kind of the subject range is kind of how I frame it is um looking at the spirit world, magic, folklore, and kind of how they interact and overlap in places. I interview a lot of practitioners. I try and really um present as many voices as possible.
Yeah.
I've had Catholic exorcists on, like I've tried and kind of so everyone can look at all sides of the story and kind of add to the corpus of knowledge and opinion and information out there. I've been doing it for about 5 years now, 5 and a bit years now actually, and
Is it
that's
a
it.
lot? lockdown baby, like hair in the
Yeah, yeah, it
hawthorn.
kind of
Yeah,
was. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. When I was doing YouTube videos, as before that, because I had nowhere to put the stuff, and I was like, "Well, let's put it on YouTube."
Right.
But yeah, kind of like properly kind of metastasized. Yeah, around lockdown for sure.
Mm.
Um, and before we wrap, there's one thing that I kind of wanted to land because I think it's really relevant
Please
to
do. Yeah, please do.
your audience. So, and it's not in the book, but a there's there was a witch trial very close to where I live,
Mm.
and essentially it was a case of malaria. Where a woman got sick and she started seeing spirits, and they brought in kind of a healer slash witch to kind of help deal with this young lady who was seeing these spirits. But one of the interesting things in the accounts of this is the lady who was afflicted talks about how her spirits guided her to a field outside the town, and she was instructed that in that field there was a crock of gold, and she could find it, and etc. etc.
Mm.
However, in vision, she in this delirium, she saw as two figures walking towards each other on the other side of this hedge.
Hmm.
One was a strikingly beautiful woman in a green dress, and the other was this man in black walking
Mm.
towards each other. And she asked the spirit, "Who are those?" They came to kind of together and they're kind of held hands. And she said, "Who is she?" And the
Hmm.
spirit said, "That's the queen of the fairy. And if you kneel to her, she will give you an income."
Hmm.
And she didn't kneel to her, but it kind of fell apart there. But we have literal accounts of the queen of the fairy with the man in black. There's
Wow.
also that's the spirit, and there are
Mm.
testimonies as well in this Scottish database of witch trials where um, some of the people who've been accused talk about a man in black came to me, told me
Mm.
he was the king of the fairies, you know. So
Is
it,
that is that can I just is that um literal material in black, or are we talking about a black mass shadow?
we're
Is
talking
it
about
like
strangely enough, it's like it's black appearance and appellation.
yeah,
So you
yeah,
can't have a figure who is like not African, but it would be
yeah.
presented as Caucasian with jet black or just dressed in black.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So I mean there's the whole Batman phenomena,
very similar stuff.
particularly in America. Yeah, it's very, very similar sounding. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And just on a personal note, just so I can log it and I'll have a chat with you about it after. But could that possibly be like a Cernunnos type character then? Could it be like sort of that side of the pantheon?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that's good.
So I think what we're looking at is the horned man is like the
Yeah.
spring summer version, and then the kind of the autumn winter is the dark man representing the death.
Mhm. Oh,
But again, it's so blurry. Like,
it's
but
changeable, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, in some areas of witchcraft, that's what it's seen as. But the horned man and dark man seem to be related.
Oh, that's really interesting. Really interesting. So on that note, I could literally we could go off on like so many different tangents, so many different rabbit holes from here, and we could be here all night, couldn't we? Where can people find you? Because I mean, I'm sure this will have piqued so many people's interest right now. So where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram. Just look for Darragh Mason. I'm darraghmason.com, and that's kind of got all my links on there. But if you look for the Spritbox podcast on any podcast client or YouTube, you'll find me.
And your book is available.
Oh yeah, it is yeah, all kind of online big bookstores. It's there, and like I think most esoteric bookstores will have it. But probably the easiest place to get it is the likes of kind of Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, that kind of stuff.
We'll just say that we'll just reiterate again that you don't do any kind of gin magic to bring people luck or to cast them out. So
Don't do that.
that's
Yeah,
definitely off
do
the board if you're
that.
contacting.
Yeah.
Oh, bless you. On that note, thank you so, so much for coming along. It has been absolutely fascinating and just pinged off my brain in so many different directions. It's unreal, and I love it when that happens. And if you could stick around, I'll like a bit of a chat with you. But for now, thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll have you back.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's brilliant. Drop your comments below. I always forget the like, subscribe, malarkey. You all know by now what's what, but it does help. And comments, always read them, and I'll pass any back that need passing back at any point. So, wishing you all well, and thank you very much for watching.